It was the ride that was supposed to make Kings Island the Universal of the Midwest. But of course, those were famous last words. Hello, everybody. Alongside Don Helbig, I'm Ryan Sir, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans because that's who we are and that's who we care about. So, Ryan, 2001, Paramount's Kings Island, they teased guests with the closure of Kenton's Cove Keelboat Canal, and they hinted at an exciting new adventure coming for 2002, and boy, did they ever deliver. On July 2nd, 2001, the park unveiled Tomb Raider, the ride, featuring a massive 17-foot tall Hindu goddess, Brahma, prop that was from the first movie.
Yeah, July 2nd. What an early date to announce the next year's attraction. But, you know, the anticipation was off the charts. The ride actually cost a whopping $20 million, which was a lot for the time. And it was one of the park's most expensive ventures. It was the world's first and only giant topspin, performing 2 inversions in a cycle lasting about 2.5 minutes or so.
Now, the whole experience, it was immersive from the entry plaza with a Land Rover Defender representing Lara Croft to the pre-show room featuring the Brahma statue and a video establishing the ride storyline around the Triangle of Light. So I thought that was really well done, from start to finish, from the time you got into the line until the ride experience.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think that this would sit on the shelf with any ride at Universal at the time, at least. But let's not forget the ride's original soundtrack. I mean, we're starting to see that now a little bit more, but at the time it was earth shattering for a seasonal park. But it was composed by Rob Portiff, the sound effects by The Bakery, and voiceovers from Miss Angelina Jolie herself from the the film's cast. It was a sensory feast, wasn't it?
It was, and Rob, a member of the Kings Island Hall of Fame, he was a former entertainer there, and one of his first big projects was creating the soundtrack.
My father would love to have seen this.
Very cool. Yeah.
Now, the ride itself, it was a spectacle. I was flipping through darkness, those icy lava pits and things that were there. The god Shiva's piercing eyes, all synchronized with the music. It was a cinematic experience, I thought. What about you?
Yeah. I think that it was
Mm.
one of the most impressive things that the park had ever done. Like, I think hands down. I remember riding it for the first time and just being absolutely blown away that this was at my park. But of course, fast forward to 2008, Cedar Fair takes the reins. Tomb Raider the ride becomes the Crypt. And this was obviously because Tomb Raider was a Paramount property and Cedar Fair didn't own the rights to it. But the changes were significant. Aspects of the original rides being removed, including the Shiva goddess statue, water, fog effects. And it was just a large gondola at that point.
Yeah, and they reduced the size a little bit of it. The weight of it created a lot of problems. If you remember when the ride first opened, there was an abundance of downtime with it. So was guests were unsatisfied in that respect. But when they did get the ride in, I mean, it was a fantastic ride. But then you cut off a couple of rows to try to lighten the load and helped a little bit. But the Crypt, it underwent multiple transformations from a techno soundtrack to Complete Darkness to Howling Wind and Beating Drums. The ride even cycled through various musical scores, including the selections from Inception, but nothing really worked after they changed it to the Crypt.
Yeah, I completely agree. The Crypt actually, I believe, changed the programming too. The first year it was incredibly intense, probably too intense in a lot of instances. But after those iterations, the Crypt gave its last ride on October 30th, 2011, leaving lasting memories, of course. January 2012, it vanished from the park's website, confirming by officials on Twitter that it had been reaching the end of its service life and will not be opening for the season.
Yep, I remember making that announcement. I know there was a lot of discussion of when do we let it be that the ride wasn't going to return, and my thought was, let's be transparent, let's control the narrative of it, let's let people know now instead of waiting until later, and then it pops up on the fan sites and everything else, and it looks like then the park's trying to hide something. So we wanted to get in front of it, and it was just one of those things that the guest time is valuable in a park, And when you have a ride that's unreliable and they've maybe spent 30, 40 minutes waiting in line and then it goes down, you don't know what's going to open back up, you just can't get that time back. So it was one of those things where the decision was made to retire it just because it wasn't reliable and it was taking valuable time away from the guests when they would wait in line and it would break down.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember it being down quite a bit. I wasn't as disappointed when it was removed as the Crypt. I think if they had removed Tomb Raider, I would have been really disappointed. But since it was the Crypt, especially that second iteration of the Crypt, it was just a ride that, if the line was short, I would do. But giant top. I don't think they make top spins anymore, let alone giant top spins. But that was a technological marvel. Um, and I know they explored a bunch of ideas for how to handle this, including two different gondolas, like two regular top spins was something that was pitched around and stuff. Settled on the
Mm-hmm.
large version, and different distributive weight issues, is my understanding, as to one of the core problems with the actual ride itself.
Yeah, the weight distribution was a problem. It caused a lot of stress on the structure, the ground. Imagine, let's just say your swing set in a backyard, and when you're swinging really hard and everything like that, you can see, on the sides where it's kind of coming a little bit up and down out of the ground and that. So a lot of issues there with that that they were always having to work on just because of the weight. It was just causing a lot of problems. But when you look at the storytelling, when it first opened as Tomb Raider: The Ride, um, that was impressive, and there really wasn't anything like that, at least in the region, when that first opened. So you really did feel like you were, experiencing a Disney caliber or Universal caliber attraction at Kings Island.
Yeah, and the park definitely played into it. So, theme park legend Jeffrey Siebert was marketing communications area manager, I think, at the time. Um, and he did a
It was a long title. I just remember
Yeah,
that.
he was marketing communications area manager, and then
David
David
Mann.
Mant was I couldn't think of his last name. He was marketing communications manager. So obviously both of them are doing rather well. But so Jeff came up with this sizzle video. I think it was for No Coaster Con, where he played like a National Geographic guy, and Tomb Raider the ride. Oh
Oh yeah, that was a fantastic teaser video. I really, when I look at a ride like Tomb Raider, it makes me, think back, conjures up those memories of all those great teaser videos that Jeffrey Siebert and the team would do back in the day.
yeah. So definitely an interesting thing, and it was funny because it was two very different yet very, very well meshed intellectual properties that he was using. Because he was using Tomb Raider and he was essentially mocking National Geographic. But National Geographic isn't part of Tomb Raider, and Tomb Raider's not part of National Geographic. But he was able to peer into the world of Tomb Raider playing a character that was
Mhm.
from National Geographic, which I thought was awesome. But let's walk through a little bit of the experience of riding Tomb Raider, because Don, I can't tell you how many friends I have that are younger than me that never got to ride it, or only got to ride the Crypt, or
Right.
whatever. So many of you would be familiar with Madame Fatale's Wax Museum or Cavern of Terror or whatever they call it nowadays. In the beginning of that, the area where you go through the the actual the cave. Sorry, I'm losing easy words today. You go through the cave and you go through the cube. That's very similar to how it was for Tomb Raider: The Ride. But when you get up into the chambers, that's where it's very different. Do you remember what the first chamber did?
Trying to think off the top of my
I'm
head.
playing trivia with you now.
I don't. I just remember the pre-show was, one of my favorite parts of the ride, maybe even more so than actually riding sometimes. That was really well done. There was a lot of just the decor and everything in there, very well done. I remember that. But I don't have an answer for your question there. I don't
Well,
remember
let
that.
me let me spark this memory for you. So they separate. They would take in a group of 60 or 70 or however many it's at the time. They would separate them into lines of three. So it was three parallel lines.
Yeah.
And
Okay. Now
they
it's
would
coming back
wait
a little bit.
there, and then the door would be shut. It was a circular door,
Hmm.
and there was a pattern, a circular pattern on the door, and you would hear this chime, and this light would project onto the door, that would have the same pattern, and it would twist and turn until it matched the pattern on the door, and then there'd be fog, and the door would slide
The
open.
door would open, right, and then you walk into where you get into the ride.
Right, so then you get into the pre-show, and that's when you have the Shiva statue. No, is that Shiva in there, or is that like a Buddha thing? I can't remember what it was. But Shiva is
I,
inside the ride holding the jewels, right?
right inside the
So I
ride,
don't know if
inside
it
the
was the
ride. Yeah,
same
so it's
character or not. But anyway, so you'd sit in there, or you stand in there, I guess, in the same three lines, and then they would have a screen that would come up from the lap of the Buddha
right,
looking statue. And that's when they played that video that you said was almost better than the ride, which I agree with. It was so
right.
hype, and it was, no one gets the best of Lara Croft unless she lets them, and that sort of stuff. No, I'm sorry, that was part of the ride. That wasn't that. It was she thought she could come in, nick the treasure, and that would be that. And then it shows like a
Right.
montage of her shooting and spinning and flipping and stuff, and then it just ends with famous last words.
I suppose she just figured to pop in, nick the treasure, and that would be that. Famous last words.
And then the door would open, and then you'd walk into the ride. So it was
You go
greatly
in.
theatrical. Just hats off to them. So the ride obviously it was manufactured by Hoos
You
International.
still remember like the little the sound, like the little it was almost like a little drum beat and stuff like that when you were sitting in there getting ready to, they're checking your lap bars and
Yeah,
all that.
they've used it for
Yeah.
Haunt and stuff, I think, since
Oh
then.
yeah,
And they
yeah,
used
yeah.
it
It's
in the
been out there, but
Adventure Express line, I think, before. So they had that, and it was funny because the employees always used to refer to it as the Tomb Raider Shuffle because they would catch themselves checking bars to the beat of the drums. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but the ride,
A lot of fun though, wasn't it?
oh my
I mean, it really.
gosh,
I mean, it fell into that category of, I like this. There was a storytelling, so I like that part of it. Um, but it was fun, but at the same time thrilling.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I want to cover here, Don. I've got a lot of thoughts about this ride, but so manufactured by Hoos International. They made the giant top spin. I believe Technifex did the special effects for it. You mentioned some other people in the beginning of the show. There's a lot of hands in it. But one of the things that was very interesting, and I actually learned this on a tour that I did for one of the coaster events with Jeffrey Siebert, actually, was that when we talk about the braking mechanism, you mentioned, you swing on a swing and the poles come up in the air and stuff. Well, the gondola, and I wish I had a way to illustrate this on the screen. I'm not going to try to draw it or anything, but it would catch it in a way that was so awkward. Just imagine if you were this machine and somebody picked you up with your arms behind your back. That's kind of like the equivalent of how it would stop the gondola. Um, and it would creak and stuff, which you never knew if it was part of the show or, or what. But anyway, so it has all that energy. It got all that energy to it. So it has to transfer that energy out, so I guess it doesn't get hot or whatever. I'm not an engineer, but so it would siphon it to this device that was behind the building facing the beast, and it would make like a wheel spin or something or make a shrieking noise. You know what I'm talking about? And
Oh
that
yeah.
just dispelled all this. I think they should have powered the city of Mason with it, with how much energy it was dispersing. But I always thought that was really really cool. And yeah, it's they've never tried to build another one of these giant top spins again.
No, but I mean, innovative. You had this, it was one of the first, storytelling attractions that I got to experience in my days of, visiting Kings Island as a guest. I remember being there on media day for it. They put on a great show. That day I remember they had all the, the different actors, dressed up. They had the actress that looked like, Laura Croft doing her thing, climbing on, outside of the Crypt building and that. Just really well done. It was a big spectacle and it got off to a great start. Just unfortunate. One of those rides that just didn't work.
Yeah, I agree. And then there were
And by work, I mean long term. I mean, it worked, in terms of what it was supposed to do. It just wasn't something that was sustainable. It just had all those different issues that would plague
As
it.
with so many things in the theme park industry, the few that got to enjoy it really enjoyed it. But there were other Tomb Raider the rides around the chain that ultimately had similar fates. Well, I don't know about several others, but at least the one in King's Dominion was not a giant top spin, but it was like a double-sided one, and it was inverted,
Yeah,
so your feet hung off. I actually did get to ride that.
and it was outdoor.
Yeah, and it was outdoor, but it still had fire. Like it
Hmm.
sprayed like I guess propane or natural gas or something heavy onto the water and would light it on fire. It was really cool, and I rode that when I was doing a fireworks show there, so I only had about an hour to kind of enjoy it, and I'm glad I did because they ended up removing it because I guess theirs was not as problematic as Kings Island, but still kind of problematic. Um,
Yeah, that
yeah,
was a good ride there too. I liked it. It was different, being outside. Like you said, but you had the pyro and just different effects. That was a good ride.
yeah. I wish I could have ridden that as Tomb Raider. I wonder if the decision to change it to an outdoor thing was a monetary thing. I imagine it probably partially was, but they changed it to an inverted one, which was also a prototype, which was also kind of risky. So I think that maybe it was just a creative decision at the time. I don't know. It'd be interesting to find that out. But yeah. Any final thoughts about Tomb Raider: The Ride, Don?
Right now, I just wish they would find something to do inside that building during the core season. You mentioned it's Madame Patel's during Halloween Haunt, but it sits there vacant. It's used for storage and that during the spring and summer. But you have guests that walk by, they wonder what that was. Those that remember it know that nothing's going on in there right now. I just would love to see something go inside that building because it's got a lot of opportunity there. I think for the park, if they were to do something with it. But for right now, for me, if I walk by it, it just brings up the memories of what's not there now.
Yeah, I agree. And to address one thing, we don't hear this as much anymore, but I think a lot of this might have been kind of bitterness from when they removed the ride. But in the years following the ride, I remember a lot of people are like, they need to tear that building down. It's such an eyesore. I don't think so. I
It's
think
not
that
an
it's
eyesore.
I think
It's
it's
not an
enough off the
eyesore.
path that it doesn't hurt. I honestly think that like the Killmart building is far more of an eyesore. Even painted, like it looks really good painted up, but it's still an abandoned building. You know?
Right. Right.
But I love that building is huge. That building is kind of a marvel in itself, and they could put a big dark ride or indoor spinning coaster like Exterminator or something in there, I imagine. I don't know how construction would go because it has a roof on it. I guess they could
If
cut
you
through
have
it.
to bring in cranes and that, it would be problematic a little bit, I think. But
Yeah.
it's just to me, you just walk by and I noticed it because I knew what was there. So it could blend into the just the woodwork. You could say, of just those that maybe didn't remember it as a ride in there, and it just blends into the river town. What's there, like any other building. But I remember what was there, and just having gone inside the building after it was removed. And, there's just opportunity there that I'd love to see it used for something and not just for, those 6 weekends a year.
Yeah, I agree. So Don, let me ask you this. I'm putting you on the spot here. You have 10 seconds to tell me. You're going to put one ride in there. You're the decision maker. What's it going to be? The time is ticking.
It's going to be a dark ride.
Okay, good answer.
It's going
Good
to be a
answer.
dark ride, yes. Not a roller coaster, but a dark ride.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Anyway, its legacy lives on forever, right?
It does.
All right, let's move on to the listener question.
All right, we have a listener question is from Evan Ponsnigel. Evan, some may know, is the author of the book Kings Island: A Ride Through Time. Did a great job with that. And Evan wants to know, what is your favorite gift shop or merchandise location in the park in its history? That covers 50 plus years now. So what's your favorite merchandise gift shop location in park history?
Um, yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say that I tried to grab my copy of Evan's book to show it off to the camera, but it's not within arm's reach. So I do want to
I
give a
was trying
plug.
to delay there to give you enough time to pull that,
Well,
but
you know you.
I thought that's what you were trying to do.
Yeah, well, I'll put a link in the description where you can order Evan's book. For real, you got to buy Evan's book. It's so so good and so thorough. And I mean, I knew a lot about the park and I learned more from him. But favorite retail, that is such an odd question. I liked the Rock Shop. That was different, you know. It was kind of like a Gadzooks or a Hot Topic inside Kings Island. That was fine. I never bought anything there, to be honest with you, because I did like it because it had band posters. So I thought that was kind of cool when I was like a teenager. I also if you want to consider this a shop, that place, I think it's now where the Diamondback exit building is. Could you do the mining thing there? Was that building, or was that one of the ones that was torn down?
Well, there was one building that was used. It was kind of a stage that they had some shows and that on, so it was kind of more facade. Where the exit is, that was a wood carver shop. That's where Woody Harrelson worked in there. And then there was another one that was kind of between the entrance and where you have the restaurant there, Rivertown Brew House. There was one there that was another shop.
That has to be it. I was probably like 10 when we did this, when we did the panning stuff. So that's mine. What's yours, Don?
Well, I'm kind of torn. I've got two things, and for different reasons. In the 70s and early 80s, there was the Reds Dugout Shop,
Oh, really?
which was located in Rivertown. So yeah, I have a lot of memories of that. I would go in and buy some different Red souvenirs and that. If they were on TV back then, you didn't have every single game on TV, but if it was a Saturday and the game was televised, I'd be able to take a break from the riots and go in and check and see what the score was, or they'd have the radio broadcast on at night, so I'd go in and see what the score was. So I enjoyed that shop a lot. And then there's on International Street, the Emporium. That one for different reasons, and that is, just the number of, some people that worked in there that meant a lot to me, that I got to know in that. So that shop comes to mind just because of the people. Al Freeman, that and some of our listeners know, he was one of the people that worked in that shop. Evan worked in that shop,
Right.
and some other people. So there were some people that different parts of my life and all those years I was riding the racer, that worked in there. So for that reason, because of people, I'll say the Emporium, but because of what the shop was and the merchandise in that, the Reds Dugout Shop.
Okay, I wanna add two things here, so I want you to hold me to this so I don't forget one of them. The first one is I want to add my number one favorite shop. This popped in my head was the KI Collections in 2022 when it was like the 50th
Hmm.
store essentially. We used to specifically check that for new stuff because we loved the 50th stuff and the 50th logo. We would me and my like friend group would check it to see if there's new stuff, and we would compete to see who could buy the new stuff first. I got so much stuff with that 50th logo on it. It's insane. But yeah, so I think that was my favorite because that was part of the fun in 2022 was seeing what new merchandise was out. We still kind of did it this year, and every once in a while there was some new stuff, but it just wasn't as special, obviously. Now, the other thought is, and I need to pick your brain with this, Don, because you have a way better memory than me from stuff from when I was a kid, but I remember on International Street, maybe in front of like Starbucks, was there a shop that was like downstairs? Like you'd walk down steps and there was
It
like a
wasn't.
flat. And
It
it's not,
wasn't
you didn't go inside. It was like a flat thing and it was like a cart
there.
down.
No, there was on. It was part of the outside of like by the facade, the walls, and that. There was like a little cutout where it went down a little bit.
Okay, and then they like just had like a rack of stuff and some
Yeah,
poor sap
yeah,
employee
but there,
was
yeah,
stuck
yeah.
down
There
there.
maybe it had like 3 or 4 steps. You just go down or whatever, but it was just like a little cutout, type thing. Just was more of a theming type thing than anything else.
Yeah, I remember it being like a full staircase, but I was also like young and stupid, so I could see myself remembering that incorrectly. Um, yeah, that's cool. We're gonna have to do an episode on the history of International Street. Just
We
talking out
will.
loud. But that's not for today. All right, everybody. I'm Ryan Sir, along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.